Welcome back, friends. In this video, we'll learn what is a value scale, the anatomy of shadows, and how to add values to your drawings. Just a quick side note before we start. This video will be an introduction to rendering. Drawing and rendering are two different things. Drawing deals with the construction of your subject, whereas rendering is adding shadows, textures, and details. Keep in mind that in this course you will learn how to build the foundation of your drawings. And in order to render your drawings realistically, you need to have a strong foundation. Rendering is such a big topic. You could have a whole course only for it. And this lesson is here to give you an introduction to rendering. So think of this video as your starting point. Let's get into it. So what is a value scale? A value scale is a system that allows you to organize your values. It shows you from white to black the range of shadows you can achieve. Knowing the range of shadows is super important when you're shading, because the more range of shadows you have, the more realistic your drawing will be. Value deals with the lightness or darkness of a color. We're able to perceive the world because light reflects off of things and it goes into our eyes. And then our minds rationalize what we see. Value and light go hand in hand. When you get to the second level of this course, you'll see that drawing is really all about seeing. And without light, we can't see. Value holds the key to achieving the illusion of light in our drawings. Basically, the whole point of value is to achieve an illusion of light. Using a value scale is a great way to make sure you have a full range of shadows. When I first started to understand value scales and how to apply them, I would take a reference image and set it to black and white. I would then isolate 7 to 8 values and make a value scale. This would be my key to seeing where I needed to use which value. This was a good way for me to start understanding and using values correctly, which let me see an immediate improvement in my art. With that in mind, let's talk about the anatomy of a shadow. Let's use this egg to understand the anatomy of shadows. But we can't talk about shadows without talking about light. To understand how the shadows work, you have to know your light source. Light is the reason we see anything. So let's find the light source. In this case, we only have one light source. Since we have only one light source, we can see a clear difference between the light and the shadow areas. The line where the light ends and the shadow starts is called the terminator line. From the terminator line, all the planes that are moving away from the light source are in shadows. These shadows are known as the form shadows. You can also see the cast shadow. The cast shadow happens because the egg is blocking the light from reaching the table. An easy way to find the size of the cast shadow is to imagine two lines from the light source to the terminator line, and casting these lines into the surface where the form is sitting. The darkest area is where two forms meet and the light can't reach. In this case, it's where the egg meets the table. This is known as the occlusion shadow. We can also see that the light reflects off of the table into the egg, creating a thin line of light here. This is the reflected light. Sometimes you can see a darker plane of shadows along the terminator line. This is the core shadow. Let's talk about the light now. The plane that gets hit directly by the light source is the center light. You can also see the highlight. This is the reflection of the light source in the form. All of these elements together reveal 3D form. So, to reiterate, The first thing you want to do is find your light source. Once you have your light source, you can clearly see the light and shadow areas. The light area is the core light, and the shadow area is the form shadow. The line that divides the two is the terminator line. The cast shadow is the shadow that gets casted from your subject into another surface or surfaces. You also have the darkest area, which is the occlusion shadow. You'll find this where the forms meet. And the reflected light. The reflected light is the light that bounces off of the surfaces into your subject. But how to apply this to your drawings? I've found that the best way to learn about values and light is to start with the simple things, just like shading forms. So I will start by just shading a sphere. For this demo of rendering, I will be using my Feels Like pencil for Procreate brushes, but you can use your favorite brush set. I would recommend to choose a pencil or graphite one. And now, let's draw our sphere. And as we said before, to draw a sphere, you have to start by drawing a circle. You want to see quick and loose movements from your hand to make this circle. Make sure to use your whole arm, and once you feel certain about the lines, darken them. You can also spend some time cleaning your drawing a little bit. Once you are happy with your circle, you can turn it into a drawing of a sphere. To do this, you can draw two lines that form a cross. This cross will determine where your sphere is looking at. In this case, this will determine where your light source is coming from. So now that you know where the light source is, you can sketch your highlight. For this, you can make a small circle where the lines meet. Then you can work on the core light and the terminator line. So this is the areas that are in the light and the areas that are in the shadow. After this, you can draw where your cast shadow is. So you can draw two lines that go from the terminator line to the surface that your sphere is on. I'll clean up my sketch a little bit and make the drawing of where my cast shadow will be. You can clean up your sketch until you're happy with how it's looking. Now that you finish your drawing of a sphere, it's time you start to render it. I will rename this layer Sketch, and I will make a new layer that I will place underneath my sketch. You can begin with a medium tone. This way you will see that it's much easier to go to the lighter and the darker areas and use your whole range. If you start too light, you have nowhere to go in your scale for your highlight. So it's always a good idea to create a base with your medium color. So with this medium gray, I will start to fill my whole sphere. Take some time to clean these lines and make sure that your sphere is smooth. Once you're happy with this, you can turn on the sketch again and make a new layer. And here's a tip that has saved me some time when rendering. If you click on the layer where you added the medium tone and press select, this will allow you to draw anything you want and not go out of this sphere. And then you can choose the highest value you have to define your highlight. Continue going down your value scale to keep on bringing the light into your sphere. In this part, what you're trying to do is separate the lights and the shadows. Keep working through your value scale and keep adding light values to the areas that will be the core light. Once you have that, you can smooth your illustration with the smudge tool. And keep on building your core light until you're happy with how it's looking. Now that you have your basic lights defined, let's move on to a bit of a darker tone. In a new layer, start working on what will be the form shadow. Keep on building the form shadow. Now that you have the terminator line, you can define your shadow areas with a darker tone. You can soften the transition from your core light to the form shadow with a medium tone. You can also go back to your highlight to make sure that it's light enough. Now let's use more values. This will help you add depth to your illustration. So with a bit of a darker tone than the ones that you've used during this drawing, keep on adding to the form shadows. You can very lightly bring this shadow up just to round up your sphere. But make sure to keep the core light and the highlight clean. Keep on going down your value scale to add more depth to the shadows. You can make sure that everything is smooth by picking medium tones within your illustration. To do that, you can tap your finger on the screen for 1 second and this will help you pick the color that you want. And with this tone, you can smoothen your illustration. Keep on doing this until you're happy with how your illustration is looking. You can merge all of the layers that you've been working on for now so that you can use the smudge brush to blend these layers. And very lightly start to blend your values together. A good way to do this is following your form. In this case, since it's a sphere, I will be making circular movements to soften these tones. This will really help make your drawing seem 3D. You can keep on adding to the shadows until you're happy with how it's looking. The idea with this exercise is that you start to use your whole value scale. So don't be afraid to make it darker and use more values in this illustration. Once you're satisfied with how your shadows are looking, you can start working on the reflected light. So with your lighter tone, you can add a very thin line, and this will be your reflected light. Merge again and keep on softening your drawing until you're happy with how it's looking. Once you're happy with how your sphere is looking, you can start working on the cast shadow. But to do that, you have to define the surface in which your sphere is sitting on. So with a light medium tone, you can go ahead and add the table where your sphere is sitting on. With a soft filling brush, fill in the area where your cast shadow will be. You can soften the edges of it with a lighter tone. Now go to the darkest value and add the occlusion shadow. Now that you've placed the occlusion and the cast shadow, you can make sure that your tones are dark enough in the sphere. I see in this illustration that my shadows can be a bit darker, so I'll go ahead and darken them a little bit. You can bring some values from the cast shadow to make sure that everything is blending together. But make sure that every time you add to your sphere, everything is smooth. You can keep adding very lightly to your sphere. You can go ahead and use the smudge tool to blend everything together. You can also use the smudge tool to soften the edges of the cast shadow to make it seem a bit more realistic. Make sure that your core and occlusion shadow are dark enough. If you see that they're not, you can go ahead and pick one of the darker values in your value scale and darken these shadows. I can see that the reflection light is a bit too light, so with a darker tone, I fixed that. I like to add some extra texture to finish my illustrations. I feel like this gives your illustrations a bit more personality. So with a funky texture brush, I'll go ahead and add some final details to the background. You can go ahead and add finishing touches until you're happy with how your illustration is looking. And there you have it. This demo was a quick introduction to what rendering is. Following these steps, you can start to practice your rendering skills. So you can keep this formula in your brain. You can start with a medium tone. After that, you can define where your light source is coming from and start working on the lighter areas. Once you're happy with how that's looking, you can start working on the shadow areas and continue to work on the cast and occlusion shadows. Of course, at some point in your illustration, you will start to go back and forward between all the parts of your drawing. But it's always a good idea to have a formula in mind when you're trying to learn something new. When I started, one of the biggest problems I had when shading was that I didn't separate the lights from the shadows enough. I didn't use enough range of shadow. This happened because I didn't use my full value scale. This made my illustrations look a bit mushed together and not with enough contrast. To separate both planes properly, it's important to keep the value scale in mind. Notice that during this demo, I used my whole value scale and not only 3 values, for instance. When I first decided that I wanted to improve my drawing skills, I got this one teacher that made me fill a whole small sketchbook with simple forms and shadow studies. And I remember thinking, this is so boring, it's not gonna help me at all, I just wanna draw a garden fairy and have fun. But I couldn't have been more wrong. I wouldn't be where I am today if I wouldn't have taken the time to practice and practice and practice and practice the most basic skills. Hard work and dedication are the keys to improving your drawing skills. And it all starts at the beginning, with the simplest and most basic parts. Once you level up your most basic skills, the fun really starts. So take your time to level up and have fun. Now it's your turn. To start, go to the worksheets in this video. In the first part of the worksheet, you'll have 3 forms on the left. The assignment is to copy these drawings on the right. Once you're done with each of the forms in the worksheet, it's time to draw your own form and add shadows to it. Learning how to add shadows to your drawings takes time and patience. Copying simple forms like this is a great way to understand and use values correctly. And I know what you might be thinking. Where's the color? I need some color. I get it. I felt the same way when I started. But I promise you, this is the easiest way to improve your art skills. To start thinking about the values and working as you would work with a pencil on a piece of paper. Learning to apply values correctly will help you achieve a more realistic style faster. Color is just way too complex to worry about it when we're starting to work on our art skills. When I started, I spent almost a whole year working only in pencil. And this might be different for you. But I found that the more value studies I made in black and white, the more confident I felt. Even though these exercises might look basic to you, they are incredibly valuable. Shadow studies can be fun, help you build confidence, and speed up your learning process. So, just like Luke Skywalker trusted in Yoda, trust in me you must. Because nobody becomes great overnight. We have to be patient and level up our basic skills before we move on to more complex drawings. Make sure to share what you do for this assignment in social media or in the Design Cuts Community Hub. I would love to know how using value skills and adding shadows to these forms helps you. Once you're done with this assignment, you will be officially ready to start level 2. I can't wait to see you there.